Hey everybody, this is John Carnell and I'm here with a DevDrop for the month of October 2021. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy as this year is rocketing into the fourth quarter and we're going to be done before we even know it. So today what I want to talk about is I want to talk about a new CLI feature that we're introducing. It's currently an experimental feature that will allow you to take the output produced by our CLI, in this case, our JSON that's coming from our CLI, and apply a template against it so you can transform it into a different format. This is often a very common task for system administrators who have to either extract some data, transform it into an Excel spreadsheet to do some work, or transform it into a different format for another system. And it often falls under kind of those system administrative functional but ugly tasks. So what we're going to talk about is turning on this feature first. All right. So if you should be downloading the latest version of the CLI for this. You can check what experimental features are available in that version of the CLI by typing in GC experimental list. And it will give you a list of all the current experimental features out there. Now, this transform data feature is very close to being released into the main CLI. But if you do not have it turned on, right now it's enabled true for me, you can say GC experimental enable, and then the name of the feature. And that will turn it on and make it available to you. Now, one thing to be aware of is experimental features are turned on by the profile that the feature was enabled in. So if you have the feature enabled in your default profile and you have multiple profiles associated with your CLI, if you do a -P and try to use that feature and you haven't explicitly enabled it for that profile, you'll get an error, or you won't get the behavior that you expect. So I just bring that up because that's something to keep in mind as you're working. Now, back to the feature of transforming data. You know, when we released the CLI, a lot of times we told people, hey, the JSON data that's being produced by the CLI matches exactly what our public API is doing. And that's fine. It's a great format. We have no problems with that, but you often have to transform it. And the way we were showing users how to transform it was by using a tool like JQ to feed the JSON in from the CLI and then spit it out into through JQ out into a different format. And that works all right, but many of our users came back to us and said, I'm not really a JQ expert. We're not allowed to have JQ installed on our machine, or we have to go through a security review in order to do that. And so we're like, well, you know what? Golang, the language that our CLI is built on, basically supports a native templating language called Golang Templates. Why don't we simply expose that and allow you to take the output from our CLI and transform it? So the best way to understand what we can do with that is to look at a few examples. So let's go ahead and start out with something simple. We're going to do an export of all of our users. We want to be able to filter out all the users with the title of agent. And then we want to pull out 4 or 5 fields, ID, name, email, and division, along with their ACD auto answer setting, and put that into a CSV file. Now, we could very easily do something like that using a JQ command, and I'll just throw this up here real quick so you can see that. But again, for those of us who are not JQ savvy, and I'll admit I love the JQ, but you know, you're doing a lot of work here. You're taking the results from the CSV, you're having to pump it through multiple JQ commands just so you can go out and get the results. Now, using a Golang template, it allows you to go out and basically build a relatively simple template that you can use with some native functions. And I'll show you where the Golang template documentation is on the Golang website. And so in our example here, we're building a 2-line template with the first line basically printing out a script, and I forgot to put the division in here, sorry, that is going to print the columns first, and then it's just going to walk through using a range command the JSON data that we're producing, and it's going to check to see if the title is equal to agent. And then it's going to take and print out as a comma separated list each of the different fields out there. Now, a couple things to note here. Range is basically the looping construct that you can use in a Golang template. All of our JSON is basically being converted to a map of maps. So if you think about using arrays and maps, and that's basically how you're going to manipulate that JSON data structure coming out. But this is a very simple, very 2-line, very easy to understand 2-line little template. So let's go ahead and we're going to go out. Oh, I don't want to do that. I hope I didn't accidentally delete. Okay. Delete my division. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and we're just going to run this command. And this time, we're going to add an additional flag, -- transform, and then the path to our template file that we just created out there. So the template that you were just looking at is in users to csv.template. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And of course, that's not going to work because I was running it one directory up. So let's go ahead and run that. And there is our CSV based file. So very, very easy. Very much easier for most people to understand than trying to go through an obscure JQ command. But I produced the CSV file based on the JSON that was being produced. All right, so let's go ahead and look at another example. This is a little bit more complicated, but this is one that comes directly from one of our solution consultants who was like, you know, I love the templating language. And what I ended up doing is I used this templating language to take all my users, filter out to the group that I want, and set their ACD auto answer, I think it's auto ACD answer element on their user object to true. So let's go out and take a look at that. Let's see how we can accomplish that. I'm going to say via ACD auto answer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a slightly more complicated template. This is still all Golang. But what I'm going to do is I'm first going to go out and find the number of elements that are sitting out here. And this right here isn't native Golang, but we've included the Sprig library in with our Golang template. So we add like a whole bunch of functions. The Golang templating language as a whole doesn't have a lot of native functions built into it. So we included Sprig in here. There's about 70 additional functions. So we're using this to find the length of the number of items in there. We're going to subtract 1 from that, and then we're going to multiply it by -1, and we're going to put it in a variable called -l. Now, this is important because we're basically using this to drive whether or not we put a comma at the end of our formatted JSON. Believe me, it took a lot of time to kind of figure this out for such a small thing, but once you kind of get the hang of it, it's pretty easy. Then like before, we're going to range over our elements, but rather than going through and going and just ranging over the raw array, we're going to go and pull out, first of all of our data into a variable called L, and then we're also going to pull out the index. And we're going to say, if we are equal to the title of if the record that we're looking at has a title of agent and the ACD auto answer is false, then we're going to go through and we're going to just create a little bit of a snippet of code with the ID of the agent that we are the user that we want to update, setting that ACD auto answer to true. And I'll show you why we're going to do this in a moment. But basically, we're just building an array of these objects, but we're transforming it into a smaller subset. So let's go ahead and run this command. So by default, right, we've got GC users list -a that's giving us our full JSON body in an array. But by going out there and running this command through that transform that I just showed you guys, I can now go out and I can apply a filter, and I've basically filtered out all of my users that had the title of agent and whose ACD auto answer is set to false. And I'm going to produce a new body where the auto answer is set to true. So now I could save this out to a file. I can do anything I want with it. Well, in this particular example that one of our solutions engineers, consultants were looking at, is he's like, well, this is really cool because then I can pipe it through to the GC users bulk update. And I can go ahead and I can update those users to auto ACD true. So I'm going to go out now. I'm going to take that command that I just was doing with my transform. And I'm now going to put this out to a bulk update. Now, remember, the bulk update, unfortunately, only lets you do 50 records at a time. So if you've got more than 50 records, you're going to get an error. But it was still kind of a cool example to show here. So I'm going to go out. I'm going to do my bulk update. Now, you see this time, the bulk update command returned the full record for everything that I updated. Now, all these users have their GC auto answered true. So let's go ahead and run the transform again, because remember, we were trying to filter out everybody that had a value of false. And so what's going to happen is we're not going to get any data back because we've already updated the records. So what the transform feature really lets you do is it lets you go out and really kind of transform your data, maybe apply some basic filters, functions, and manipulate it without having to go through and write a full-blown Python program, or pipe it to a Python program, or do a big ugly JQ command. It's just yet another feature that we put out there, kind of sticking with our ethos that we want people to be able to do simple tasks very quickly. So I hope you enjoy the feature. If you want to find more information about it, I would point you to the following websites. Is one, I would take a look at our CLI documentation. It gives you just down here in our experimental features section, it's kind of got some documentation about how to transform the data. Then I was also encourage you, there's plenty of tutorials on the web about the Golang templating language, but you can go out and you can explore the Golang templating language right on their website by going to package.go.dev/text-template. Or you can also look at all the functions that we've added via the Sprig library to help kind of include in your templates. There's over 70 of them in there. There's some of the most common tasks, like for instance, when you were seeing that length function out there, that's not a native Golang function. Let me go ahead and find that guy. This is not a native function, and the sub and the sub and multiply, subtract one and multiply one are not native functions in Golang. So this is where the Sprig function kind of really comes in handy. There's a boatload of functions out there that you can use on your list and be able to do things with it. And then finally, these examples that I put out here, I put out in the quick hits repository. If you go under users and you take a look, we have a directory called transforms. And in there, you can see the two different transforms we wrote. One for being able to update the user and use it, or not update the user, but convert user data into a CSV. And the other one is to go out and do that update with the ACD auto answer function. So I hope you guys like the feature. Please give us feedback. Please post questions on the forums, or if you come up with a cool example of where you've used a transform, I would really love to see it in our quick hits repository. We're going to be continuing to build out on this capability. We want to include in a future release the ability to pull down a transform directly from GitHub, so you can kind of build a library of transforms and stick them in your source control repository. But please give us feature, and I hope everything that this is something useful and that you'll enjoy. Give us feedback, leave information for us in the forum. Thank you, and everybody have a great day.